It's 4:20 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. So hello and welcome to the Cannabist Show. I'm producer Vince, and here's your host, Ricardo Baca.
Vince, dude, thank you. And to everyone watching and listening today at home, welcome to the Cannabist Show, where we talk about all things weed.
All things.
And that is the serious cannabis news and the not so serious reviews and videos and everything else. In fact, if you pop over to our site right now, thecannabist.co, you will see stories about a Colorado to New York crime ring taken down.
Yeah, Buffalo, New York.
About 89-year-old actress Cloris Leachman getting high in her new film.
Oscar bait.
And about entrepreneurs who accidentally found their way to the cannabis industry.
You know, like you do.
Of course, producer Vince is over here in the corner with me. Dude, how have you been?
I have been great, Ricardo. Thank you for asking. 2016 is here. It's a brand new year. I spent my weekend watching the Broncos win the AFC over at Mile High Stadium. That was rad. And when I wasn't doing that, I was interacting on Twitter with @MileHighDre, one of our listeners, who had some interesting insight into some mistakes that, well, not mistakes, but things that didn't carry over from the video version of our show to the podcast version of the show, which I really appreciated. Everybody keep getting at me and Ricardo, @Cannabist, @Bruvs, @VinnyChant. You can find us anywhere. We love the input. How have you been, Ricardo?
I know, we appreciate that, especially because, you know, when you're doing a show that, you know, here we are, and if you're listening to this, obviously you don't know this, but we have a whole set. It's kind of beautiful, you know, we have multiple producers in here. We do this in the Denver Post newsroom, but when you're just listening to the podcast, of course, it's an entirely different scenario. So thank you for listening to the podcast. Watch the show, give it a try sometimes. We're always making tweaks. Vince, I've been great. It is time. Time for the Week in Weed. You ready for this?
I have never been more ready for a Week in Weed than this one, Ricardo. Let's do it.
Well, Vince is very prepared for this Week in Weed, apparently. So we are going to start right here in Colorado, where a Denver Post investigation recently showed that marijuana businesses have proliferated so rapidly in some of Denver's poorer and more diverse neighborhoods that city officials are now exploring ways to disperse future growth more evenly.
And let me pull up the map that we made, Ricardo. This map we put together tells a fascinating story. See, this first layer, that's all the marijuana businesses in the city and county of Denver. The stores, the grows, everything. Now I'm going to add this next layer, and you see this next layer and the lighter colors represent the city's poorer neighborhoods. What do you think, Ricardo?
You know, it's just fascinating to see the information laid out that way. You know, many big stories have been written kind of addressing the presence of alcohol shops, of liquor stores in these low-income neighborhoods. And now, is this the same thing? It's not quite the same thing, because I think a lot of people saw this, that it was going to happen this way years ago. You know, this was certainly a concern, and now it's certainly happened this way. So I don't think it's a big surprise, but I think seeing the information laid out in that way is pretty compelling, and you have to wonder if we've taken the right path or not.
Well, you have to remember that a lot of this has to do with zoning. It's not like marijuana businesses were targeting these neighborhoods or purposefully go into these places with the intent to set up shop. It's just this is where, under current Colorado law, they were allowed to set up shop.
Of course, yeah. And Magoya, my colleague, and I, who's been on the show before, we did certainly write about that. Zoning is a big part of this conversation that cannot be ignored, because, you know, there are only so many neighborhoods and so many structures that can house this newly legal industry. So, Vince, elsewhere in the Week in Weed, 89 years old is Cloris Leachman. Amazing, and she is going for the ganja in her new film, This Is Happening. The film's publicity team shared Leachman's weed scene exclusively with the Cannabist's own style writer, Katie Shapiro. So, hey Vince, let's have a quick look at this amazing scene of 89-year-old Cloris Leachman getting into it.
Here it is, Ricardo.
Why do you keep him up there?
I made him 2 promises before he died.
You realize he's a dog, right?
Dead dog. Lucky him. Oh. 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 Oh,
One for you, one for me.
Listen to me, big boy, it's time to
Yeah, that's
go.
good.
You're not for me. and
What's weirder, that I'm
that's
talking to
all
myself?
right.
I don't know, maybe that's weird. Or what's weird, maybe that I can't find the pharmacy and get my grandma medication? Or what's weird, that my dad's a complete lunatic and degenerate? I don't know. Oh, here's a pharmacy. Shit, how do I get in there?
this chair. If you put it upside down, look what happened. It's a same.
And, oh good, you're closed. Because why would you be open?
What did you do to this joint?
I just ate it.
You ate it.
I didn't intend to.
I can't even put that in my mouth.
Oh,
Get up and walk with me. And finally, a U.S. District Court judge in Colorado this week dismissed a lawsuit involving a credit union hoping to serve the marijuana business and the Federal Reserve. The ruling is a major step back for legal marijuana's fight for bank accounts, bank loans, and other financial arrangements available to traditional businesses.
Yeah, dude, this is big because the judge just flat out dismissed the lawsuit. Wouldn't even hear it, right, Ricardo?
Yeah, you know, he did. The judge said that if he forced the Federal Reserve to allow this credit union to operate, he would be encouraging the Fed to break federal law. And of course, this is something we're very familiar with, federal law. So how will the judge rule on the Pot Credit Union's other lawsuit, which is against, I believe, the National Credit Union Administration? You might expect more of the same, but we'll see, ultimately.
Yeah, we will. Here it is, 2016 recreational marijuana sales in the United States just had their second birthday, yet the industry still can't open a bank account.
It's true. It's amazing. If we could have transported ourselves back to 2013 to try and envision what these kind of lingering problems were going to be, I don't know that a lot of people would have thought that this would still be here, being such an impediment to the legal cannabis industry as we enter 2016. But Vince, my first guest this week is making her first appearance on the show, which is very exciting. As the founder of Rise Above Social Strategies, she is one of the legal weed industry's leading voices on social media. And it's my pleasure to welcome Lauren Gibbs to the Cannabist Show. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me here, Ricardo.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great that we met on a, well, didn't we meet on like a party bus? And here we are on the Cannabist Show.
Boulder.
Yeah, we were going to a farm and
A classic cannabis party.
classy. That party was very
It was
classy.
amazing, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
man. Lauren, so you'd think that handling social media for cannabis businesses would be the same as it would be for, handling social media for any other traditional business, but you'd be wrong, right? Because
Absolutely.
what is up with all the marijuana businesses right now losing their Instagram accounts and accounts on other platforms lately? What's happening?
Well, the cannabis industry has to respond to the terms of service that are on the Instagram page. So Instagram.
Are we getting back to that whole federally illegal thing that we were
it's
dealing
exactly
with?
what you're talking about. So the newspapers, banks, and social media platforms all have to abide by federal law. And they are having concerns about racketeering charges if the political wind should change. So they are somewhat arbitrarily shutting down some accounts right now, and it is very disappointing.
And you say arbitrarily because it's true. I mean, the majority, well, I don't know about the majority, but plenty of marijuana businesses, legal and illegal, have a presence on social media. And a lot of these legal shops, they're edibles makers in Colorado, they're marijuana shops in Oregon, they're getting shut down, and it does seem kind of inconsistent. Is there a specific reason behind any of the ones that you can tell?
The frustrating part is there's no transparency in the process.
Yeah.
So something gets flagged, and an employee at Instagram decides the fate of your online presence. And then you get a form email that has no explanation, whether it was a certain objectionable picture or something in your bio. They don't tell you. And you can object at this generic customer service email, or what a lot of companies do quite successfully is they respond to the whack-a-mole game by setting up a new account.
Oh man, it's amazing. This reminds me a lot of a story I wrote earlier, well, I guess last year in 2015, when certain marijuana businesses were having a hard time pushing their apps through the Apple Store. They had fewer issues when it came to Google and the Google Play App Store, but when dealing with Apple iOS, Massroots, Weed Maps, some of those bigger apps were having a hard time and facing the same repercussions, because ultimately they were just getting a generic letter back and saying, sorry, this isn't working, without getting any concrete advice for what they could do to, to remedy the situation. So is this just something that is facing modern marijuana inside the tech industry right now?
It is a problem that any marijuana business is facing right now. But what's crazy is that all of these companies have the technology to geo-target on their platforms.
Sure.
So feasibly, they could allow it in states where it has been legalized without promoting cross-state commerce, because that's really their concern.
And that was something that Apple had done. I know with Massroots, they had said, if people are in a non-medical, non-recreational state, we're okay with them not being able to download the Massroots app from the iOS store, but it'll be interesting. Lauren, I met you through Women Grow. You handle their social media. This is what you do, but you also handle the social media for Willie Nelson's weed brand, Willie's Reserve. So this is pretty amazing, and I'm sure more than a few readers, readers and viewers and listeners are wondering how you end up working for Willie Nelson especially in marijuana.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a dream come true, and I think that it represents the level of opportunity in the cannabis market right now. That I started my business 2 years ago, and I immediately got involved with Women Grow and was immediately on a national stage. And I connected with the Willie's Reserve team at the Women Grow Leadership Summit in May. And
wasn't his wife out here at that last year? Yeah,
Annie was here along with other members of the team that attended, and it turned into a very productive relationship, and it's a wonderful team to work with, and it's a brand that really shares my personal values. And if you think about Willie's history of supporting small business, they didn't go with a big agency for this. They liked my work, and they reached out to me and said, we want you to do this for us, which is really,
so cool,
it's pretty exciting that the industry has a market that's so open like that. For your opportunity to get, you can really catapult your career in a way that I haven't ever seen before.
From Farm Aid to helping out with Rise Above social strategies. It's exciting.
Yeah,
you're right.
I
mean,
really
you
exciting.
are a mom and shop pot business here in Colorado, and that he's choosing to work with you and support your business certainly says something. So you're the first person somewhat aligned with Willie's Reserve that we've had on the show. So Lauren, I'm going to ask you the question you don't want me to ask you.
Of course you will.
When are these stores going to open? And is Colorado still going to be the first Willie's Reserve?
It's a little bit similar to the question of when are you going to run for president? The politicians get asked, and it'll be ready when we're ready to do it right. And there's a really fantastic, brilliant team behind the scenes that is working really hard to get everything to a level that will meet Willie Nelson's standard, and that's critically important to us. So I wish that I had a date, because I would love to know too. But stay tuned on social media, because you'll certainly hear about it there.
All right, Lauren Gibbs, do you expect movement in 2016? Maybe some sort of storefront opening this year? Is this the year?
Oh, you will see items in the market in 2016.
All right. Well, that's good enough.
Yeah.
We'll take it. A couple years ago, I was at South by Southwest, and there's an amazing party that's thrown on Willie's Ranch every March during South by, and
I'll be
kinda,
there.
Oh, you're going out there?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
For
well,
his barbecue in March.
I might see you there.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Well, what an amazing experience just to walk. There you are in Luck, Texas, right? And it's just outside of Austin by about maybe 30-minute drive, but to be able to walk on his land, to go into his little church, that seats how many people? It seats 30 or 40 people. It's just tiny. He's just such an American icon, and of course a cannabis icon as well. When we're having this conversation, so
a dream come true.
There you go, Lauren. We're also going to get personal here because you are getting married soon. Congratulations. Nice. But your wedding is starting to become something of a prototype for like-minded weddings elsewhere, and it's interesting. I want to hear all about this progression, how this happened. But tell our audience what is so unique about your upcoming nuptials.
Well, it is happening on a ranch in rural Colorado, the totally cannabis-friendly venue that we're thrilled about. They had a very odd request. Their only restriction was that I ensure that no edibles get to the farm animals.
No weed for the goats.
Yeah.
Okay. The cows too, just keep it away. Okay.
Yeah, but otherwise,
that was their only request?
Yeah, otherwise they're like, do whatever you want. This is your day, and you're renting our private property, so you can do it the way you want it.
And so you were throwing a cannabis wedding, and now you're actually doing interviews and talking about your cannabis wedding, a very intimate experience that's suddenly become public. Tell us some of the features of your wedding, since you're open to talking about it, that people are finding more and more interesting.
Well, we're going to have a bud bar. And we'll have 2 bud tenders there that will be educating all of my guests and monitoring consumption. They're both people who will be very helpful if someone does overconsume. I did choose not to distribute edibles because I have a lot of people coming from out of town, maybe novice users, and edibles are great for a lot of reasons, but I don't want to set anyone up for a bad experience at my wedding.
Yeah, no, totally.
So it's just, an open outdoor wedding with a bonfire and s'mores and some pot.
And is there a specific timeline for the weed? Like, now we smoke pot? Or is it just like the bar? Like an open bar throughout the entire event?
I did have someone reach out that wanted to sell me a ceremonial pipe for the wedding,
of course.
Which was a little
never to miss an opportunity. I'm sure there's always an entrepreneur there ready to help out.
But we're, it's just going to be like the bar, we're going to have several different vaporizer options for people, some pens and some classic pre-roll joints and one-hitters. So there'll be a lot of different ways for people to consume.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I know we're going to talk more about that in the future, so I look forward to it. In the meantime, thank you for coming on the show. We're going to catch up more with you here very shortly. Now, before we get to introduce our next guest, I'm going to throw to our very own captain of cannabis, and of course that is Professor Pat, for this week's entry in the new cannabis lexicon.
Diffuser. Part of many heady glass rigs and water pipes. Diffusers come in many configurations, but their purpose is the same: to add additional sites for the fermentation of bubbles as well as help with airflow. Diffusers and all the agitation that they create help to cool the smoke or vapor prior to inhalation, which makes it smoother on the lungs and often more flavorful. For example, this piece has a 6-hole diffuser and it hits super smooth.
All right, thank you for that, Professor Pat. On to our next guest, who is the National Director of Public and Government Affairs for Mindful, a group of marijuana shops in Colorado and soon Illinois. So let's bring him on out, Mindful's own Erik Williams, to the Cannabist Show.
How are you?
Erik, such a pleasure meeting you, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Ah, yeah. Sharply dressed, I must add.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Tell me more about this coat. Is that cashmere?
This is camel hair coat. You know,
Camel hair.
I'm
okay.
from the East Coast, and I think that there is a huge bias against that here, and I love to just throw it kind of in people's faces. And
an anti-camel hair bias?
No, an anti just like no one wears jackets or ties or anything out here,
yes.
and I've got a bit of a shoe fetish as well. So
Some people say welcome to colorful Colorado. I say welcome to casual Colorado because you're right.
Colorado. Exactly.
Yeah, we held the first ever Cannabist Awards about a month ago here, and I felt severely underdressed because I dressed how I normally do, and we had one of our guys who was running the red carpet. You know, they were like wearing tuxedos and suits, and some of the nominated folks. I was really impressed, but you're right.
This is how I dress at all times. I mean, I wear a jacket to get the Sunday paper. That's it.
Nice. Well, there you go.
Yes,
well,
thanks for
welcome to the Western United States, and that's in fact something I want to ask you about, Erik, because you are the National Director of Government Affairs for Mindful, as I mentioned, operating all over Colorado right now, and soon Illinois. Very exciting. Want to hear about that. But you're the first person that we've had on the show with that title, National Director of Government Affairs. So tell us, especially as it relates to legal marijuana, what does that position entail?
Well, I'll give you the long answer, but I'll give you the short answer first. And the short answer is making sure that patients across the country have access. When I joined the company, one of the main reasons that I did was because they had such a commitment to patients, to the quality product, to access in so many ways. And I had already worked to legalize medical cannabis in Connecticut. I had wrote and passed the law there. Had a strong intention to keep doing that. They had intentions to have a national presence, a national brand, and you know, someone needs to make the market at some point. And so that commitment has worked really well for us. And that's essentially what I do. What else I do is, you know, we're in an industry that, apart from actually creating nuclear power, is going to be the most regulated industry for the foreseeable future.
True.
And you know, having spent 20+ years in politics, working all levels of politics, there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it, and I think one of the biggest keys that our company and many, many more companies are seeing now is that you can partner with your regulator is a lot better than fighting your regulator.
I think a lot of your colleagues here agree.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to do this around the country. You know, and it's put us in a position to be real national leaders, to be thoughtful when you're going before a legislature, to be, you know, thoughtful when you're going before a police chief in, you know, some remote town in the middle of Illinois or Tennessee or anywhere else in the country, Florida, Alabama, you name it. It's given us a voice that we think is really important. But when it really gets down to it, it's about education. And, you know, I truly believe in this plant. Have for most of my life. I see on a daily basis what it can do. And, you know, I'm sure everyone here would agree. If people just know, it moves the plant forward. So,
as we've seen with public sentiment changing so dramatically, even in the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really is people encountering those stories firsthand and hearing it or seeing it on, you know, a Sanjay Gupta CNN documentary and minds changing. Some of your job, as you explain it, sounds a little bit like lobbyist. Is there some lobbying in there, or is it different?
Yes and no. Just to be clear on this, I'm not a registered lobbyist. That's a technical thing. But that being said, you know, we have lobbyists in a number of states in which we're working, and those, you know, we work directly with them. But a big part of what my job is to help bring the business side to it. You know, Mindful's been operating for 5 years. I know the business inside and out, and along with all of the people who are my partners, we have the expertise to bring to the table. We've also written so many laws and rules and regulations, you know, at a state level, at a county level, municipal level, working on some international stuff. It brings the credibility when people say, well, what did you learn? What did you do right? What did you do wrong? And I think that we also take the unique approach of saying, hey, this is how it can fit into your community. I mean, a law that you know, we write in Connecticut is going to be very different than a law in Tennessee, which is a state where we're working right now. And moving forward, the whole notion of access for the most needy patients, just having that basis and making sure you can get all that you can done Because the big thing is just show them. Because we've already seen now that have been doing this for 5 years, writing laws and having them implemented, you can always just look up and say, yep, the sky's still there. Hasn't fallen.
And you know, this is exactly what the power of social media is in cannabis right now, because we're all attaching our faces to this and telling all of our personal stories, that whether you have a medical need or you just prefer this over alcohol, put that out there for your network to know, and then that reduces the stigma. People get more comfortable with you. So the types of stories that, I have a background in politics too, and stories work there, stories work in social media, because that's how you really change people's minds, by getting them to emotionally connect with this cause.
Yeah, and we always say that one person at a time, face to face is the best way.
And beyond social media, to make it a grander level, people have just said the level of education out there of real information and not, you know, propaganda from one side or the other. People can make their own minds up based on the internet, the expanse of the internet, of which, of course, social media is a big part of. Erik, especially since you're visiting us from the East Coast, I want some of that perspective in here. You're an advisor to NORML's Connecticut chapter. As you just mentioned, you wrote Connecticut's MMJ laws?
Yes.
Wow, okay. Yeah. Well, so tell us, what's the legal marijuana climate like on the East Coast here as we go into 2016? Because very interesting things happening this week and later this year, of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, the East Coast, it's very much 3 different places. You know, you've got, well, let's call it 4, because Florida is something beyond everything else.
Vince loves picking on Florida, so you're in good company.
But, you know, there's the Northeast, which is a very, very different animal. And, of course, we've got medical, pretty much the entire Northeast from New Jersey up. And so, you know, hopefully we'll get Pennsylvania soon. But the medical side has been moving forward. Now we're going to see Vermont, we expect to have full legalization happen this year. We also expect in Massachusetts, they've qualified for the ballot there. That I really think is going to be a huge game changer when Massachusetts goes recreational. That'll happen in November. And also we're looking at Rhode Island possibly doing it as well. Beyond that, so those are the 1 states, and we can get back to talking those if you want. And then we've got the mid-Atlantic states that are sort of doing some other experimentation. But then further down, we've got the South. And that is, there's not a great outlook there. And we have seen, you know, a lot of the southern states said, oh, well, we solved the medical marijuana issue for, you know, the seizure kids and the folks with cancer. And it was a farce. It was a joke. It was a law that you saw get passed. It was written at an ALEC conference.
And you're referring to like CBD-only laws, maybe in Georgia or other southern states.
Or in Florida, you know, at this point. There's and you know, that was a really important part for us. And we've been doing this for a long time. And so we actually are working in Tennessee right now.
Okay.
And we see that as the sort of tip of our southern spear. We want to get that done. They call it the belt buckle of the South. So we're pushing it there.
Kind of looks like a belt buckle, nice and vertical.
Yeah.
Or horizontal.
Horizontal, exactly. But the South has some work to do still. I think the Mid-Atlantic is going to roll out with its medical. We'll hopefully get in Pennsylvania going really quick. But we're already seeing, again, the sky hasn't fallen in the Northeast. And, you know, there's a lot of people who took responsibility for getting the laws passed, and they're saying, you know, now's the next step. You know, we've seen the experimentation, they're up for learning, they want to certainly drive the conversation forward, but unlike the West, where you've got a lot of states are isolated in a lot of ways, the East Coast has a lot of people, states poach from each other all the time. You know, you're always looking at the next border state's tax policy, or you know, anything else that they're doing. So once
how much do they charge on alcohol? Maybe we should drive over there and pick up a load.
That's exactly the case. So it's looking positive, and it's looking positive because things have been working in all the right ways, all the ways that the advocates say this is how it's going to work. It's been successful, and you can't argue with success. And now that they're seeing all the tax dollars. You know, the choices for even some people, like, okay, are we going to make any more cuts to the bone? You know, are we literally going to be throwing seniors out onto the streets? Or, let's look at what we can do with medical cannabis, or let's look at what we can do with recreational cannabis.
For a good look at tax dollars and what they can mean for even municipalities, cities, or counties, I would recommend people look. We just ran a story in the last couple days here at the Post and the Cannabist about some of the smaller communities in Colorado that are choosing to go with marijuana, and how some of their larger neighbors don't. So, one example is Manitou Springs has recreational, Colorado Springs doesn't. Log Lane Village has recreational, Fort Morgan doesn't, Garden Grove does, Greeley doesn't, Vail doesn't, and pretty much a lot of places around Vail do. And what it's meant for these communities, I mean, you're seeing substantial change, and I think now is the time when we really do start to see these legislators, these voters, pay notice to that, because it's not changing the game. But in some of these small communities, it is absolutely changing their reality for public works projects, for parks and roads. And Erik, we could go on all night about that, but I appreciate you.
I'm a policy junkie. I could talk about that.
Sounds like you both are. And we're going to talk some policy here. Recovering policy junkie. Erik, I want to go back a few years to a letter that you wrote and published. You published it in Ladybud, great site, and you wrote it to your then 9-year-old daughter. In the letter, you imagine your daughter growing up in a better world, and I quote, "I want you to laugh one day at the silliness of our quaint country long ago banning marijuana. I want you to be baffled that people went to jail for growing a plant and putting it in their body." I want to ask you now, in 2016, do you think we're getting closer to that world that you wrote about in May of 2013?
I really do, and faster than I had expected.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And now, my kids are about as, they're educated about cannabis more than, I'd say, 99% of adults out there. It's unbelievable how much they know and they understand it. And it really brings back to how I got involved in cannabis as a whole. And this was, before medical marijuana was even a term. In the early 90s, I was working for a congressman and, someone who literally lost his entire college career. The whole series of, he got caught with a seed on his desk. The RA said, well, I don't like you, essentially, so I'm gonna report this. And then they mandatory reporting to the police, just this whole domino effect, and it ruined this person's life. And there's thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases just like that. And I see my kids and they see this now. I even tell stories like that. And they are already like, that is just absurd. But it's also about a greater education that I do with my kids too. Like playing, we play a game anytime a pharmaceutical drug gets advertised on TV. We all get to yell out one of the side effects, which is, I've got a 10-year-old son, so of course he's always shooting for diarrhea or uncontrollable vomiting. First time those words have been said on this show. So.
I hope not. Jeez, come on, what are we doing here, Vince?
Is there a string for that?
Exactly. But it's about education and seeing it all. And you know what? This is cannabis is such a huge part of making so many things right in this country. So yeah, I think we're getting there. We're getting there quickly.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and some of my favorite anecdotes shared on this show are really, from a parent who is likely in the industry or passionate about the subject, given what we talk about on the Cannabist Show, and the lessons they give to their kids. Because ultimately, even I think about my mom's stories growing up and her telling us about a different America where where water fountains and buses were being contested, and that this is a U.S. that she remembers, and this is a different subject, but it certainly has some similar movement and points of comparison. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I always makes me smile so much when I think of that.
I want to bring Lauren back into the conversation because presidential candidate Bernie Sanders just threw something out on Twitter in the last week, and it has been retweeted like wildfire, something that I'm sure you've been following, Lauren. And here's his tweet. It says, quote, "How is it that a kid who smokes marijuana gets a police record? but the CEO of a company that ruins people's lives has no criminal record, end quote. So my question to both of you, especially since you both have political history, speaking from that political history, but also as a voter, how big of a role is weed going to play this November when we are deciding on who will be our next president? Lauren, let's start with you.
You know, I think it depends on if there's a strong anti-cannabis candidate, because that's going to really force a debate.
Right.
And there's a lot of voters, I think, that in a lot of states, that especially if they have children with medical needs, that they move there for that reason, it's becoming a very dominant factor in their decisions around their life. If they're going to move across the country, they're certainly not going to vote for someone who's going to try and take those rights away.
Exactly,
So,
that's a good point, especially as you look at the U.S. map and it's so separated, and so everything's a different shade. You know, so I think that that's going to be a big part of it. But Lauren, I mean, we aren't seeing any substantial anti-cannabis candidates. I mean, I would say Christie on the Republican side is probably the biggest anti-opposition, but it's not looking like he stands much of a chance. So what happens when you have two candidates who are both pro-states' rights standing up there?
Yeah, I think that you look at Colorado, where cannabis legalization passed at a higher rate than Obama was elected president. So you have a very strong voting base in a lot of these states. And it's very interesting to me that this issue is still up for grabs between the political parties. And that libertarians are not all over it. Democrats are like, you know, Bernie's definitely stepping forward with it, but it's shocking because it could really mobilize a huge voting bloc.
Eric, what do you think about what Lauren just said?
I agree with her on almost every point, you know, and when it gets right down to, you know, why are Bernie's folks not mobilizing on this, they're already there. There's no one else to get on it. But I don't think it's going to play a large role unless there's an anti-cannabis candidate. And that anti-cannabis candidate, I mean, when you look at the electoral map, you're right, it's spread out all over, but all you really need to look at are the purple states. And if you take Nevada off, if you take Colorado off, I just don't see how that candidate can possibly win. I mean, I've done this math. Again, I'm a policy junkie, but I'm also a political junkie. I've spent way too much time looking at the maps, looking at the numbers, looking at the polls. That's unbelievably something I enjoy. But it's I just don't see how it can possibly happen. But it's also one of those things that you have to answer. You know, I get legislators from around the country who say, what happens if we pass this and then, you know, we're going to have the next president can actually just change the whole thing. That's not the truth, by the way. You know, pointing out to people that, you know, Congress, the Republican Congress, just defunded federal actions. They've done it again and again. This, honestly, you're right, no party's grabbed it, but it's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. I mean, cancer doesn't check your voter card. They just don't do it. So it makes a lot of sense for people to do what they want in an individual state, the state's rights. I think that's where it's going to play out. I don't see it being a big part in the presidential election.
That will be fascinating, because if there isn't a massive opposition candidate, then it becomes something of a non-issue, where there's at least a certain amount of agreement on the states' rights platform, and really that's all the Obama administration has done to this point, just kind of like hands off, go for it, and maybe we'll be moving forward in that same kind of federal landscape.
What I do look forward to is in the national debates, I think that we could see the first time having a real question asked, not a joke.
Right.
Yeah. And
there was such a great
right there would be an important step in our political dynamic.
Certainly for the cannabis industry's, search for legitimacy and involvement and attention. And yeah, there was such an opportunity for that when Boulder, Colorado hosted the Republicans, and even CNBC, I believe, they were like kind of hyping it up. Hey, we're going to Colorado. We're going to talk about everything. And then there was no question asked about it. You guys, it is time for the pot quiz. All right.
Pot quiz.
Pot quiz. First, we need to get you your water, Lauren.
Okay.
Which one is yours? Do you know?
Yeah, the one with the lipstick.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes
I can
sense.
always find my glass.
Hot pink lipstick. That's the one. Okay. So pot quiz, fairly basic, 2 questions apiece. If Lauren gets the answer wrong, you can steal it, Erik.
Okay.
And vice versa. Okay. And we'll see who's on top. Lauren, starting with you.
Okay.
As of January 4th, Oregonians started paying sales tax on cannabis, making it only the 3rd item in Oregon that you're required to pay sales tax on. Can you name either of the other 2 taxed items in the state of Oregon?
Oh, God.
1 is fine. There's 2.
Diapers?
Diapers is your guess. That's an awesome guess, by the way. No, not quite diapers, but I love the guess. So, Erik for the steal?
Cigarettes.
Also an awesome guess, also wrong.
Really?
Oh, man.
Shocked at that.
Hotel rooms and prepaid cell phone credits.
All right.
What on earth is going on in Oregon? I know when you go there, there's always a weird thing about like who pumps gas and also, you know, the lack of tax is always a good time when you're there. But yeah, so now it's weed, hotel rooms, prepaid cell phone credits. Who knew?
All right.
Erik, you have this question. In a little over 2 months of medical marijuana sales, Illinois patients purchased how much medical marijuana in November and December? This is multiple choice. A, 1.4 million. B, 1.7 million. C, 2.2 million. D, 2.8 million.
1.7.
Wow. Out of the gates.
You mentioned right off we've got a dispensary in Illinois.
I know. So clearly you read this story. But still, good memory. I'm terrible with numbers. I read the story too. I wouldn't have remembered it.
I actually just quoted that number today, as a matter of fact.
Nice. Okay, yeah. Big things happening in Illinois. And we could take this opportunity. Do you have any idea when the shop might be opening and
we're hoping
where
in the next
exactly?
2 months. We're hoping it'll be in the next 2 months, and we're right outside of Chicago. And you can go on to BeMindful.today, and you'll get any information from us. Our dispatcher will be there.
Very cool. All right, Lauren, he has a point now.
Okay.
Here is your question.
Pressure's on.
What East Coast state's medical marijuana program launches this week?
New York.
Oh, damn, yes. I don't know where the ding was. There's the ding. Okay, all right. Good move, 1-1. I like this game. Okay, all comes down to the final question, which it should. Erik, this is your question, okay? Name the comic actor famous for his roles in HBO's Silicon Valley and the films Cloverfield and How to Train Your Dragon, who headlined the Leafly Cannabis comedy tour in Seattle earlier this week.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm guessing from your reaction that you're not going to steal it from me, so I really have no idea.
Let me throw that out one more time. He's famous for his roles in Silicon Valley, that's an HBO show, and films Cloverfield, which was kind of sci-fi, thrillery, and How to Train Your Dragon, which was like animation.
His face in my head. I don't know his name. I'm horrible with actors' names too.
All right, do you want to throw out a guess or no?
I don't.
All right, do you want to describe his face so Lauren might be able to get it?
I'll confess that I've not seen any of those shows or movies.
He is the one who did the. He was.
You might not want to say this.
No,
all right, Lauren, I'll give you the opportunity to at least make a guess.
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Okay, cool. So go for it. He is the one who.
Well, didn't he owns the house in Silicon Valley? He was like
Yes.
the investor guy. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever known
He
his name.
is Denver resident TJ Miller.
Okay.
I learned something new.
Sorry, TJ. And he lives here in Denver, which is kind of cool. Yeah, kind of cool. I want to say thanks to our guests, Lauren Gibbs and Erik Williams. And thank you to you all for finding us here and watching, listening. Tell your friends about the podcast. We are so thrilled, as Vince mentioned, not only about the involvement that we're getting from listeners, but also more and more listeners. So tell your friends. Easily found at iTunes, Stitcher, search Cannabist. I'm Ricardo Baca. I'm joined by producers Vince, Dane, Erik, and the rest of the crew. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you all next week.
I'm all in, I'm calling any posse you'll be raising at the end. I say it again, ain't afraid to get in. I'll be going for the jackpot with aces in my hand, I'm raw.